Is there such a thing as a visual copyright strike? Is that a possibility? Greetings, everybody. Dr. Steviano here once again. Another exciting rhetoric, debate, argumentation video. How are you people? I hope good. Hope everything's good. Do we have an audience camera today? We do. Look at that. There's our lovely little studio audience. Hey, folks, it's me. Oh, hey. Hi, everybody. I hope you like the regularity. Regularity? Is that the right word? I don't know. Anyway. I hope you like these videos. This is the next video in the series I'm doing called Bad Models of Debate. And I've been working on a bit, and it's like, how many bad models of debate do I want to make? Well, it's not really me making them. It's like, how many bad models of debate do you guys want to make? The whole thesis here that I'm operating on is that debate should be a discourse that we can distinguish from argument, from dialogue, from discussion, and maybe even from rhetoric in general, or persuasive rhetoric in general. Why do I think this is a good idea? Well, I think that when we throw around terms like we're just having a discussion, we're having an argument, we're having a fight, when we throw these kind of terms around, I think we lose a lot. We lose a lot of the importance, the imperative of dialogue, the imperative of rhetoric to be something that can, I don't know how to say it, have its own distinguishing features that teach us about ourselves and about how beholden we are to language, how beholden we are to speech, to writing, all these things. These are not tools. And I think a lot of these bad versions of debate come to us. There we go. They come to us because of our vision that somehow speech is a tool that we can become skilled at using. I think this is the wrong way to think about it. I think if you are, and I see this a lot on Facebook. I follow lots and lots of people who are debate coaches, who are public speaking instructors at colleges, and they all assume at the very heart of what they're doing that this is some kind of a skill and that there are tricks to it that make you better than other people at it. And I think this is just the most unhealthy way of thinking about rhetoric, the most unhealthy way of thinking about debate or public speaking or persuasive speaking or whatever you happen to be talking about. It's incredibly unhealthy. The reason why is because then it makes us focus on mastering particular kinds of tricks in order to be good at it. Whereas I don't think you can be very good at persuading, arguing, debating. I think you have to do it because the practice of which is a practice of being a human being in society, being a human being in collectivity, where you're practicing things like democracy or democratic republicanism, things that require you to dispute who to vote for to represent you, or if you're in a more something that leans more towards democracy, you're in a system that requires you to argue with others about what needs to be done. We have a mix of this in the United States. And if you're from another country, you might think about what your mix is as well. Different countries, different systems of republicanism do it differently. But I started this video series. I'm also trying to kind of outline a book about it, about how should we define and understand debate. And it's coming along pretty well. But I think the impetus for all of this is the murder of Charlie Kirk, which there's going to be a trial soon. I'll be talking about that as we learn more about the alleged assassin Tyler Robinson. I think he's the guy. I don't want to say anything too early, but I mean, I think he's the guy who did it. The Charlie Kirk trial is going to bring up all these things too, in terms of judgment, in terms of rhetoric of judgment, forensic and epideictic rhetoric mixed, which is, and you see a bit of this already. People are like, well, this person was radicalized by careless rhetoric. Is that really what happened? Is that really the way we're going to speak about it? I do think that there's a lot of careless rhetoric out there, but I think it's mostly because we don't want to have any kind of discourse that makes people feel uncomfortable or sad or they have nothing to say. I think that makes us feel kind of bad. And we also think it's sort of a nasty but necessary skill to take others down a peg through argument or through debate. These are extremely bad models. It's a practice. It's a practice of being bad and being flawed, and a practice of being a human being and having limited perception. So this video about bad models of debate is going to be about the New York Times very recent piece where they went through and they talked to college debate coaches and debate instructors about, well, they didn't really talk to them. They're kind of peppered through there. When I first saw the headline, I was like, oh, geez, I'm going to have to attack all my friends here.
Oh.
People I know.
Oh.
But there is an element among the rhetoric and debate world of these people who are debate coaches, and they rest on an equivocation. And that equivocation is, I coach weekend debate tournaments, ergo, I understand debate. And I think without any other kind of explanation or carefulness, some care in how you make that extended analogy between weekend debate tournament and how people argue on the street, you can get into some real trouble there, because there's not any obvious connection to me between the debates that happen at a weekend debate tournament of any format and the way people argue about politics in their everyday life. Or even how they argue about what do we believe and what do we stand for in their everyday life. This is, and everybody misses this. They'll miss that on the debate side. But then you've got people like Jay Hendricks, who wrote that horrible book. What was that book called? That horrible book called, Thank You for Arguing, right? Not even an original title. It's based on a movie called Thank You for Smoking, which was sort of about this idea of the trickster debater. And like advertising people have no soul. They can just make you believe anything. That's kind of like kind of equating rhetoric with magic, with black magic. And so we should ban black magic. But in every story, every fantasy story and every story about wizards, when you ban the black magic, it comes back to haunt you because no one's doing it. No one knows how to defend against it. So I think that's kind of how it works. I'm not much of I'm not familiar with wizard lore. I know it's shocking to you, isn't it? But I think there's kind of that's kind of a trope in fantasy stuff. Maybe if you know fantasy stuff, you can leave a comment. Let me know if I'm on the right track. Probably not. Speaking, I'm going outside my lane again, guys. Can't really do that. But I will say that we have this kind of awful reverence for people who are good at debate. And there's a kind of an awful reverence floating around for Charlie Kirk, because we tend to say, people say he was very good at debating. I'm going to challenge that. I think his model of debate is a bad model of debate, and I think the New York Times, in an attempt to inoculate us from that bad model of debate, only ended up supporting it. Now, do I think what Charlie Kirk did was bad? No. I actually kind of like the idea of going to a college campus and whipping up thousands of college students into a frenzy by letting them question you on anything you want. There's a history to this. This is a sophistic history. If you've ever read Plato's Gorgias, this is what Gorgias, his claim to fame is. He'll give a presentation. Then at the end of it, he says, I will stay here as long as necessary to answer any questions you have. And I'm sure people challenged him on different things. He said he would answer any question they had. And Charlie Kirk is a similar thing. So Charlie Kirk has a lot in common with sophistic activity. Now, is this what the sophists believed in? That's dubious. I think if you think about the sophists as professional teachers who needed to drum up their own students, what an excellent way to advertise for your ability as a rhetoric teacher than to answer every question that you're posed and answer it in a convincing way. I think Charlie Kirk had an axe to grind. I don't think he was actually interested in answering every question. He wanted to show people that his organization was the one that you should join. His organization deserved your financial support, your attention, your dedication, and he could help you answer back difficult challenges. If you would watch his podcast, subscribe to Turning Point. I don't know what Turning Point is as a subscription model or what. I'm sure they had a way you could donate to them. Donate to them, and they will provide you with this rhetorical resource. And it is rhetoric, for sure. Is it debate? I'm going to say no. Is it persuasive rhetoric meant to convince people that his particular vision of conservatism in America is the way to go. I think so. I think it is. I think it's persuasive rhetoric, and I think it's also demonstration of how right he is, because people who challenge him are unprepared to have an exchange with him. Now, that is a very bad way to convince people that you're right. It's a traditional fallacy called the ad ignorantum, the appeal to ignorance fallacy. What the appeal to ignorance fallacy says is that it's not evidence that you're right if someone cannot prove you wrong. So it's almost like the double negative argument in grammar. So if I make an argument to you, and I say, something like, salad is the best thing to have for lunch, and you say, well, prove it to me. I say, prove to me that salad isn't the best. I've flipped the burden that I should have in a debate of advocating for my belief and explaining to you why it's good. Now, why is that a necessary part of debate? Because the beauty of debate, as opposed to dialogue or braver angels, kumbaya, listening to each other and realizing we're different, is that I have to show you a linguistic representation of my mind and how I got there. I have to share with you the evidence that convinced me to get there. I have to do all of these things. And I have to treat your mind, Douglas Enninger said it best, I have to treat your mind as a fully developed human brain at least as good as mine. A human consciousness that can evaluate evidence, and I'm going to trust that your neurological composition, the brain, the mind, whatever it is, however we want to theorize that, is as good as mine. And that is a real sign of equality. Hiding evidence or relying on the ignorantum is not ethical. And it's not ethical because what you're doing is you are not showing how you arrived at a conclusion. You're saying, show me that my conclusion is wrong. Nope. And these people are not prepared for that. Charlie Kirk has a staff. Charlie Kirk had an organization. He had plenty of time to do research on these things. And he was ready for pretty much any question there, because it's more of a PR rhetorical. It's a rhetorical swaysery event to get you to participate in Turning Point. It's not a masterful demonstration of the champion debater at work. And I think debate coaches, unfortunately, because they really don't know as much about rhetoric and about the history of rhetoric or persuasion or argument as they should, because they're really focused on the weekend tournament to the exclusion of everything else. Oh, I can't do too much on campus. We have the NDT coming up. I can't do a campus debate. The NDT is coming. The NFL LD championship's coming. Oh, we got to get ready for Worlds. We have to get ready for Euros or whatever. There's a lack of connection made for students who are on that tournament debate track between what they're doing and the quality of argument and debate in the outside world. And so these people, the debate coaches have a lot of credibility because of this equivocation that debate is debate. Debate is not debate. I sound like Rudy Giuliani there, don't I? Debate is debate.
Oh.
No, debate is debate unless it's not debate.
Oh.
You remember that famous Meet the Press moment? Or he was on the Meet the Press, and they're like, what about the truth? They're like, well, the truth isn't the truth unless it's the truth. He said something like that. I don't know if I want to sound like Giuliani. It's a mistake for the channel. Big mistake. Well, anyway, let's get into this New York Times article, generously gifted to me by a fan and a viewer. The debate style that propelled Charlie Kirk's movement. The New York Times article, The Debate Style That Propelled Charlie Kirk's Movement, written by Bensinger and Smart. This is kind of old. I think the ember of this is kind of flaming out. I don't know if people are really talking as much about that, but there's a big question. Why was the entire country moved so much by the assassination of this guy who was just sort of making money as a pundit? He's a political pundit. He had a nice gimmick. He'd go to college campuses and rile them up and get conservative students by the thousands out to come and discuss with him, or he would discuss in front of them. I don't think conservative students challenged him that much. But they would come out to watch him take on people who thought they could challenge him. And then there were a lot of students who A lot of people would come to these events and they didn't have a lot of concern about hubris, and they would challenge him in front of the cameras because they thought they could prove him wrong or prove him to be an idiot. But they weren't thinking about universal audience. They're thinking about the big problem that Perlman and Ulbricht-Stidicke recognize in New Rhetoric is that oftentimes we think we're addressing a universal audience, but we're addressing a vanguard audience that appears to us to be what the universal audience should be by our own proclivities. Debate is an important discourse for the learning of all this, because what debate does is it strips everything down and it strips all that other stuff away to where you can kind of see that you can't just blame. You're not just arguing for or presenting for your vanguard audience. Because the fundamental difference between debate and dialogue and discussion and braver angelsism is you are a human mind at my level. We are equal. The evidence that has convinced me should convince you if I explain to you how I saw it and the context in which I encountered it. Now, this is something that's not just my idea. This is like Douglas Inninger has talked about that, which I mentioned a minute ago. And also the Ignorant Schoolmaster. This is Jacques Rancière's book about teaching. The Ignorant Schoolmaster. It's best not to have too much knowledge about what you're teaching because it gives you kind of a bias. And it's better to really determine what's true or what's right or what should be believed. Is you need to kind of have some equality when you're approaching these topics. And that's not what Charlie Kirk did. He wanted vast inequality. He wanted it to appear as if they're equal. But there's a vast amount of inequality when you have an entire organization researching for you and you're training and you're practicing full time. All these students are not doing that. They're going to class. They work. They're trying to do what they need to do to make it in college. They're not going to be able to compete with the engine of information and practice that Charlie Kirk had. I think it's good that Charlie Kirk is a model of practicing rhetoric. That's what this is a good thing about this New York Times article, is it shows how he had lines and he had things that he used year and year and year again, and event and event and event again. So it shows you the importance of practice at being good at this, instead of the illusion that I'm hyper intelligent so I can just make the argument in the spot. It's rehearsed, it's practiced. Talk to anybody who does high level constitutional litigation. Any attorney do that. Mooting is an extremely valuable way to practice one's arguments in front of judges of particular disposition and particular legal education, as well as mooting in front of jurors that have the same composition, roughly the same composition as in a big murder trial. You test arguments with these moot juries and moot courts to see how they play, and then you decide your strategy in the courtroom. I think Charlie Kirk probably had people helping him out with that because he's too refined. But he's still not debating. Why is he not debating? Because he's not practicing a discourse of divulgence, a discourse of disclosure. It's a discourse of kind of an aggressive intelligence and based on the ad ignorantum. Let's take a look at this article because I've been talking around it. And thank you, fan, for dropping this off. Charlie Kirk may be best remembered for arguing in public. A cornerstone of Mr. Kirk's devoted conservative following was his twice-yearly tours of universities around the country. For hours, he would cheerfully perch on a folding chair and challenge students in the public to, as he called it, prove me wrong, right? That's the ignorantum, right? Instead of that, it should be like, I'm proving you wrong, or I'm right because, and that would be a much more of a healthier debate model, because even though he would expose himself to, he'd be giving material to his opponents. They'd say, well, this evidence is bad, that's bad. He could defend that, and it would be a better model of debate. But again, he's not interested in debate. He's interested in a very particular notion of conservative politics, of right-wing politics that he wants to defend. He's not defending debate here. Never defending debate. The method is not what he is about. He's about getting you to believe in his right-wing views. Or maybe they're not his, but the right-wing views that he feels are the best for America. They're good for everyone. Right? That would probably be what he would say, what Turning Point would say, for sure. By tackling hot-button issues like abortion and trans rights, Mr. Kirk created content that became perfect fodder for brand building on social media. I agree with that. So he's engaging in rhetoric. He's engaging in an argumentative rhetoric. But is this debate? Probably not. Curated clips highlighting his wins, promoted with captions describing him as destroying liberals, have racked up tens of millions of views on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. We've all seen that content. It's worth checking out. It shows you the power of social media as a repetitive, rhetorical resource that just destroys I'm doing the same thing. It destroys television and radio and podcasting as ways of advancing political view. It's hard to imagine, and this might be more for the end of the video, but it's very, very hard for me to imagine a left-wing Charlie Kirk. And I don't know why that is. Could we have a left-wing Charlie Kirk figure? Let me know in the comments if you think that's possible and what that would even look like. I don't know. I think a lot of these things benefit a kind of a right-wing view. You're wrong, I'm right. You can't answer me. You know it's true in your heart, this kind of stuff. It's not really the way the left wing prefers to speak. But again, rhetoric is about speaking in ways that might be upsetting to you, but are effective to your audience. Maybe Charlie Kirk didn't like doing this. I think he got a lot of joy out of it, but maybe he was like, man, we should really have a fair debate. And his organization's like, no. Keep doing this. We're making money. We're moving the needle politically. Maybe that's what it is. Since his assassination, Mr. Kirk has been lionized mostly by those on the right, but also by some who did not share his views, as a champion of free speech and an interrogator of viewpoints that spanned the political spectrum. Well, I don't think that second part is true, but I do think people have said he's free speech and he was doing good stuff. I'm saying that. I think he's definitely a great model for free speech and a model of like, don't be scared. Go out and challenge people to challenge you and see what happens. But don't think that you're doing debate. Likewise, if you're not doing if you're doing sort of a non-aggressive, here's what I feel, don't attack me, that's not debate either. So Bravery Angels, you're not improving debate. You're avoiding it. Other organizations like that. I'm trying to think of the other organization like that. But there's a lot of them out there who are like, no. We still need to be able to go to lunch with our crazy aunt, no matter what she believes. Right? We should have to recognize we're different. It's like the worst kind of model of tolerance is what the Braver Angels people are about. New York Times reviewed more than 4 dozen of Mr. Kirk's debates stretching back to 2017. Wow. And discussed them with 4 debate coaches and university professors. The Times Review, which examined content, tone, techniques, and other hallmarks of each confrontation, reveals how Mr. Kirk used the debate format to deliver a consistent hardline message while orchestrating highly shareable moments. Is this a debate format? I do not think Charlie Kirk is advancing a debate format, because a debate format would exist to provide the rules of debate to both sides. Charlie Kirk is in complete control of these interactions. His staff is in control of these interactions. How long do people get to question him is unclear. How long do they get to speak uninterrupted is unclear. It's different every time. How long does he get to speak uninterrupted? More than the people questioning him. This is much more of this press conference kind of assumption where he's the person with the answers. And the person asking the questions has less time to speak and challenge than he does. But then at some point, they end that interaction, and it's not clear when that happens. In a debate format, there would be set times in agreement as to how many questions, how many times do you get to engage. Think of it, if you want a comparison to this, think of it like question time in Westminster parliamentary systems, either the Canadian government, the British government, Australian government. The question time there has rules about how many times the opposition leader can question, but the time is a little bit flexible in terms of response and in terms of questioning because of the need, because of the uncertainty of the rhetoric involved there. In those moments, there's a little bit more of a debate rule set than in this kind of a moment, which is a private company hosting a debate, really, for its own political purposes, not to necessarily get to a new understanding, but to push a particular understanding. So I don't think it's a debate format. This genre of debate, well, now we're like, okay, what's the difference between a genre of debate and a debate format? What is a genre of debate? What does this even mean? This genre of debate. I would say it's a genre of rhetoric. I don't think it's a genre of debate, but maybe they're using debate as a synonym with rhetoric or as a synonym with argument. This genre of argument. I would say that what it is a rhetorical style. which Mr. Kirk helped pioneer. That's what I would think it's best understood as. Is now a template that other social media personalities across the political spectrum have increasingly adopted. Here's a look at how Mr. Kirk constructed his viral confrontation. So, the University of Wyoming, hyperbole and go-to quips. This is going to be the best hyperbole argument ever. One of Mr. Kirk's favorite topics and the title of one of his books was The College Scam, which reflected his opinion that college was a waste of time and money. It certainly can be. But an absolute argument that way is going to be hard to prove. Although he elsewhere has stated that the point of college is to become a well-rounded citizen, what is good, true, and beautiful, in the clip below he suggests the primary goal of higher education is to compete with China and that majors like women's studies were irrelevant. I think a lot of people feel this way, but not to the point where it shouldn't be at the university. Maybe you would ask your friend why they're majoring in women's studies, and you could have a debate about that if you had equality and let them say their reasons and their evidence. That all needs to be there. Remember, debate is a discourse of disclosure and equality, and I don't think these things are present in Kirk's rhetoric. Although Kirk's rhetoric, valuable, free speech, valuable, political, arguing your political position, always valuable in a democracy, but not a debate. And we don't really have debate. And if we did, we might notice a change in our arguments, our political conversations might change because of the insights that this unique discursive form brings to us. You don't always have to debate, but you can't never debate. And we're in never debate land in the United States right now. We can ever debate. It's always hostile. It's always bad. But the Charlie Kirk thing is making people think, well, maybe debate is a good thing, but in limited doses. But at the same time, his murder seems like it's associated with what he did in some way. So we're really kind of trepidatious about it, it feels. This line of argument was most likely to provoke emotional reactions from opponents who were all college students invested in their own education, and rhetoric experts agree that getting upset or defensive is a surefire way to end up on the losing side of a debate. What? No, we do not. You can get upset and defensive and win a debate, but that upset and defensiveness needs to communicate to the audience. That's another thing about debate, is it's for the audience, and he always had a big audience. You can see it here in this clip. He's got a big audience there, but that audience is probably there to watch him and learn from his techniques to defend their conservative views. But if you get upset or defensive, you're not going to be a surefire lose the debate. It's about what are you doing in your emotion and defensiveness to prove your point. I think there's many, many, many times in a debate where it's appropriate to become emotional. And there's many, many times in debate where it's okay to be defensive. You can't just get sad or get angry, but you can use your anger to channel into arguments that will show the audience how they should feel. Rhetoric is about identification and attitude. Showing the audience what attitude they should have to an argument is an incredibly powerful strategy in debate. Part of Mr. Kirk's advantage came from repetition. You could say that again. You guys like these jokes? I don't know. He debated hundreds of people and learned how to shape conversation and where to drop in canned audience pleasers. That's like rhetoric 101 here. This wisecrack about North African lesbian poetry delivered at the University of Wyoming in April was hardly spontaneous. The Times went back and found it. I mean, this means he practices. I think it's a good thing. Any good rhetorician should be practicing their lines. It used to be, when I was in college, people used to say you shouldn't study underwater basket weaving or some useless thing like that. That was the stand-in for useless liberal degrees was underwater basket weaving. But I guess North African lesbian poetry is the one. But that really speaks to his audience because it's the exotic other, the abject exotic other from a place in the world that most conservatives would say is a non-productive developing world, and queerness, which most conservatives think queerness is an aberration or an illness, not a legitimate sexuality or a legitimate way of being. So that's a great one for that audience, but it's not good for debate because it doesn't show. Instead of saying that, if you were in a debate, you would want to provide your reasons and evidence why these majors are there, who's majoring them, why are they useless, and what the argument is about what's being lost. Like a cost-benefit analysis would be good. Maybe somebody gets a degree. I don't even think there's a degree in North African lesbian poetry, but somebody's going to prove me wrong. They're going to link in the comments and be like, here it is, here's the program. I think that I don't know if it's useless, because who knows what these things really teach. Like, I teach communication, I teach rhetoric, and I'm teaching a particular thing, but normally what happens is students take it and run with it in a direction that I couldn't teach them what to do. It's the process of learning and encountering something like Elizabethan poetry or Shakespeare or queer literature or anything. Makes you think differently, and therefore you can approach the world through differences. And debate is like a mini university in this sense, because you leave the debate thinking, wow, I hadn't thought of that. That's on my side. That's not on my side. And it changes the way you articulate to yourself your own convictions. Your own perspective changes. It might not reverse on a political position. That's fine. But it changes the relationship you have to your beliefs in this really nice kind of fundamental way. And they have all these examples. I think this is great that they put a time and a date on this, so you can really get a sense of Kirk's evolution as a rhetorician. Well, he's not a rhetorician, he's a rhetor. As somebody who's interested in rhetorical advocacy for conservative purposes and mastering rhetoric. I would say he's a master of rhetoric, but he's certainly not interested in debate, defending debate, and he's not a good debater. He's very good at persuasive kind of rhetoric and argumentative rhetoric. That's the thesis I'm kind of pushing with this. And of course, you can disagree. Even on the most progressive campuses, Mr. Kirk's debates drew large and boisterous contingents of supporters cheering him on in MAGA hats. It's interesting because a lot of these events, I think that Turning Point would insist that they be open to the public, not just to the students. And that way you'd get a lot of people from outside the university who would already agree with Kirk, to make it look like to the uninitiated that the audience is being won over by Kirk, instead of just cheering for pretty much anything he says because they love him. Or they have a very short... There's a very short warrant there on the arguments. He doesn't have to do a lot to prove his arguments to them. While he traded barbs with his adversaries, he often discouraged heckling by making space for opposing viewpoints. He enhanced his image as a defender of free speech while centering his own argument. Additionally, by restraining his audience from shouting down his opponents, Mr. Kirk insulated himself from seeming like a bully to many viewers of clips shared on social media. Please don't heckle. Please don't. I just want to understand you. Please don't heckle. But at the same time, people are there for that. But he also is like, no, you're doing it wrong. Do it like this. So he's sort of teaching people how to rhetorically respond. I don't know what their point is here. Insulate himself from seeming like a bully to many viewers of clips. I mean, I think they're like, I don't know. I would think the conservative might read it and say, well, he has to do that in order to prove the point, right? He's got to make the argument, so he needs the calmness, During this debate at the University of Tennessee in March, a student asked Mr. Kirk whether he thought abortion should be allowed when the mother's life is in danger. He talked about C-sections. I don't understand that argument. I don't know why that would be an alternative to abortion. Maybe somebody can explain it to me. I do like this. Asking opponents to define a term so you could score easy points by making them appear uninformed if they could not. Yeah, this is definitely something that you cannot do in a debate. In a debate, you can define terms, but you have to explain why that term is best for the debate. So if he was actually interested in debate and finding an answer everyone could agree to, he just kind of wants everyone to agree with him. And he already thinks he's right. So in a debate, the difference would be, here's how I define this. I define it this way because this is the best way to understand it for the purposes of trying to understand why abortion is evil. And then people can challenge it, but you see the problem with that is you open yourself up to lots of attacks. Where's that definition from? Is that really a good source for that definition? Maybe there's a better definition from a better legal context. I don't know. But yeah, this is kind of a tactic, but it makes him not a debater. He's a rhetorician. He's good at an argumentative kind of exchange. Kind of like what the sophists did to advertise for their position is like, look at how much smarter I am than you, but it comes from practice and it comes from having an audience who's already kind of there to see you triumph, which I think the sophists had, and putting yourself in a position where you're like, oh, well, you don't know, so why are you challenging me? You don't really have to bring up a lot of that stuff too. And this pivot, they say here, this is for you guys, advice on how to answer it too. This is kind of like what Bill O'Reilly started way back in when was that? The early 2000s, the talking points. How to address these political issues from a conservative point of view if you're challenged on them. And then here comes the New York Times, like being dumb old New York Times, like always, disputing it with facts when they're saying he was successful by these stylistic techniques. And they're like, oh, but by the way, the truth is, no, it doesn't work like that. Why wouldn't the New York Times engage using the same kind of technique? See, this is the problem with it, is that they're like defending something that they feel is better than rhetoric. The truth. We're not engaged. Here, the New York Times are not engaged in rhetoric. We're not engaged in rhetoric. We're engaged in sharing the facts. So we're superior to all this. And it just doesn't work like that. People don't believe that stuff. Later in this debate with the same student at the University of Tennessee, Mr. Kirk shifted to more extreme rhetoric, calling abortion worse than the Holocaust. Ben Voth, Dr. Voth is at Southern Methodist University. I've never met him, but we've done a bunch of things together, not writing together, but journals and stuff like that. Professor of Rhetoric and Director of Debate and Speech at Southern Methodist University cited discussing forbidden topics and upholding forbidden arguments as a muscular and emotionally resonant strategy, to which Mr. Kirk regularly returned, what the hell does that mean, a muscular strategy? Like, what is this word? I'm sure Ben Voth did not say, I think this is a muscular strategy. Like, what the hell does it even mean? It's nonsense. But this is kind of the problem of the debate coaches being reached out to in the media, because the media then will do whatever they want with their words. It's hard to speak in a way to train the journalists to write the complex scholarly thought in a way that's useful. This isn't useful at all. Discussing forbidden topics and upholding forbidden arguments. I mean, how is it forbidden to say there are worse things than the Holocaust? I guess you could say that. I guess the ADL would say, well, this is an anti-Semitic strategy. They might be right. But that would assume that you're denying the size of the Holocaust. You're saying the Holocaust size was overblown. Not the case. I think that's very difficult for people to make that argument. But people do it. So what would it be? Discussing forbidden topics and holding forbidden arguments? I don't know what that is. I think anti-abortion activists regularly claim that we've lost so many people through abortion, but then they don't make any kind of substantive claim about like how that benefits society, I guess. I guess they just kind of make the comparison and say, well, this is a Holocaust. But I don't understand how that's I mean, I think comparing your opponents to the Nazis is always a good thing, because people hate that, but it's overdone. It's overdone quite a bit today. And it's like just kind of like I think people are numb to it. We have a pretty big callus for people saying it's fascist, it's Nazi. We kind of have developed a callus for that. And I think people are of the attitude they want to hear more complex arguments, but I'm not sure. Yeah, it's never right to justify the mass elimination or termination of people. Sure. I think that's right. But I think this assumes abortion is some kind of a political movement. I don't know. I don't know what he would think. I'm not familiar with his argument. I know he's anti-abortion. After more back and forth, Mr. Kirk laid a rhetorical trap. When the student replied human to his question about what species an embryo is, he claimed victory, saying that implied embryos deserve human rights. Yeah, this is a typical kind of rhetorical trick, but a kind of a nice one. When you ask this question, there is no other way to reply to it other than saying human. And if you refuse to answer it, then you say, why can't you answer this simple question? You make them look like a fool. Aaron Call is like a real tournament jockey. He's somebody who's like, oh, the NDT. You know, he's like a big competitive debate coach guy. To its first national championships director debate last year, called that kind of move a turn. It is not a turn. Using the other person's own words to prove your point. It has more impact when you turn your opponent's argument to your advantage, Mr. Call said. I don't see why that's insightful. I think everybody knows that if somebody makes an admissive statement that supports you, that benefits your side. So what's the insight of having the debate coach here? I mean, I don't know. This is just New York Times logic, I guess, but it doesn't make any sense because Call is not raising our understanding of what's going on here to a level beyond what anybody who watches it would also be able to figure out. Turn is traditionally a bad thing is good, a good thing is bad, or you think you're moving towards disaster, but you're moving away from it. You're moving away from disaster, but you think you're moving towards it. I always think of the turn as like the logic about being around a black hole. Since it's bending light, when you move away from the black hole, you might be moving towards it because the entire light field is twisted in ways that you can't understand. And that's what the turn argument generally is, which is, well, you think that these things you're doing are preventative for your health, but they are actually harming your health. That's kind of what the turn argument is. But it requires access to evidence, and it requires interpretation of that evidence that has to be justified. It can't just be turning your opponent's arguments to your advantage. This is like just bad bumper sticker reasoning here. And it might not be Call's fault. It might be the journalist's fault. I always want to blame the journalist myself. But maybe he said something more complex and more interesting than that. Citing statistics with confidence, whether true or not. Well, the thing about statistics is a lot of times we believe them to be true, and they resonate with us because they already kind of connect with what we already think is true. They connect with us in a way that we believe to be the case already. That's why we gravitate towards certain numbers and we dismiss other ones. There have been great studies of this. Motivated reasoning is the name of the theory. And motivated reasoning has these great moments of people looking at evidence for a side that they believe from a source that they don't like. And then they talk about how that source is finally coming around. But if it's evidence against something they believe deeply, and it's from a trusted source, they will attack that source and say it's bad. They'll do everything they can to protect the vision they had before they were given the information. And I think that's what's going on. Charlie Kirk is no different than any of us by being like, this statistic is true, probably because he wants it to be true, but most statistics are iffy, right? They're iffy. They require context. They require an understanding of how they were conducted. They require an understanding of what kind of expertise you need to conduct certain kinds of research. Statistics are helpful, but they're not an end game. And I think a lot of us feel like if I have that statistic, it's over. Like we feel like facts end a debate, when facts are the starting point of many debates, and they're important in debates, but they're important for the debate because the debate should happen because it shows us how we connect the dots to each other, which is essential for understanding how we get to a conclusion, or when is a conclusion no longer, or a position no longer defensible. I think that's extremely important. That's why debate needs to be its own separate discourse from argument. In this debate about critical race theory, Mr. Kirk borrowed from the Socratic method, using questions to steer his opponent into a disadvantage. Well, that is what the Socratic method really does. Socrates is no neutral, happy person. He's not a believer in a method. He's really turning people towards a contradiction all the time in what we know about him, which are the things Plato wrote about him. Flustered, the young person conceded ground, and he leapt to occupy it. This is great, he said before asking another question designed to frame the opposing position. It generated the response Mr. Kirk seems to have hoped for, and he pounced, accusing his opponent of insulting the working poor by suggesting there's a correlation between poverty and violent crime. Bill Southworth, that's a name I know. I don't know if I know Bill. Professor of Speech and Debate at the University of Redlands, described this approach as trying to trivialize his opponent as an out-of-touch member of the elite while increasing his own ethos as a defender of regular working-class people. This seems like probably the best analysis so far, which makes me wonder about maybe the stuff that Voth and Call gave to the journalists weren't very valuable. But Bill Southworth seems to know how to speak to the journalists and say, and I think this is a good way of doing it, saying, aha, look at the assumption you're making in your evidence about this connection, and that's an essentialist argument. And look at how you're insulting poor people for not being able to follow the law. And that's an interesting claim to make, but it's not a causal argument. It's correlative, right? The correlation is pretty strong between these things. The Times puts it here. The factual thing. But the reason that we believe this is because we do not have good debate or rhetorical education in the United States. Poor debate education, poor rhetorical education leads to people thinking that there's only one kind of relationship and it's causal. I think it would be insulting to say poor people cause crime. I think that's what Charlie Kirk is trying to do there. But the correlation, you can make arguments from correlation as well, like the SAT, ACT, the GMAT, the MCAT. These are not causal. They are they're correlative, and I think he kind of misses that. But he probably misses it deliberately because it works well for him. Mr. Kirk later tried another of his frequently used tactics, introducing a compelling statistic in order to demolish a claim of poverty and crime. In this case, that 80% of black people in America do not have a stable father around. The problem is that statistic, which he often cites in debates, is not accurate. And he used it many, many times. He probably uses it because it works. But nobody really has a chance to call him out on it because guess what? These aren't debates. So you do not have equal time. You don't have research. There's no stable topic. That's the other thing here, too. If it's just like, come and question me about one of my beliefs, there's no stable motion. A stable motion is the most important thing you can have to resolving any kind of different views you have about an issue. A stable motion. Here's the motion. I'm going to defend it. You're going to attack my defense of it. The motion could be crime is high among black people because of unstable, because they don't have father figures. This is a common conservative argument. He could defend that. But he's got to go find the evidence. He's got to go find the expert opinion. He's got to find all of the things that connect to that. And then the opposition has to find evidence that this isn't the major factor and challenge those sources that challenge all the sources that come up on the affirmative side, on the Kirk side. So here's the New York Times debunking that stuff again. Unprovable generalizations. University of Wisconsin. I loved being up in Madison. I went there. Gave a talk up there. Gave 2 talks up there. It's wonderful. Great campus. I'll prove it to you, Mr. Kirk frequently offered in debates. What followed did not always deliver on that promise. Here he made some categorically unprovable assertions about the differences between women and men, including what women discuss when they have lunch. By playing up stereotypes, Mr. Kirk was once again pushing emotional buttons. He may have also been trying to overwhelm his opponent with what Carl Trigilio, who's coached championship debaters at high school and college levels, called sensory overload. The tactic can be successful because it is challenging to rebut every point and forces opponents to passively concede points. So this is the kind of thing that you expect a debate coach to say is, what a neat trick. This doesn't make debate look good at any level. It's like, oh, this is how you win a debate. But winning a debate is different than the satisfaction of debate doing its discursive and rhetorical work of giving you a new relationship to your position and the other position. That's the power of the discourse of debate. Not, I won the debate, because a lot of times you win the debate, people aren't going to change their mind. They're going to dismiss it in the same way that motivated reasoning has people dismissing sources and dismissing kinds of expertise. It's the same kind of thing. They'll just be like, oh, they won because of tricks. They won because of the way debate works. And that makes people want to move further away from debate. Debate, if done well and done fairly, with emotion, with 2 sides, and with equal time, and with disclosure of how I got to the position I am, disclosure of those reasons of how did I get to this conclusion by what I've seen in the context I read these things in, as well as what I've read and what data I have looked at. That changes your relationship to the position. Not necessarily disagreeing with your original position, but changes your relationship to your advocacy. And that's why debate is such a powerful thing. And it leads into better dialogues, better discussions, and better persuasive rhetoric. Without it, you get this kind of nonsense where you have, here's a debate coach praising this guy's trickery and being like, oh, debate is about tricks, and this is a great trick. I'm in on the tricks now. I feel special. Let's just dismiss any kind of definition of debate as a bag of tricks. Why do people continue to float this terrible definition, this terrible model of debate? Not debate. It's persuasive rhetoric. Debate skills honed over time. I have a lot of issue, as people know, that debate skills, there's no such thing as being skilled in debate. Unless debate is defined as a bag of tricks or a sport. Then there's skills involved. Debate is a practice that you can never become an expert at. Debate is a practice that allows you to see over and over again, when it's difficult for you to see, your motivated reasoning and your preconceptions, and that your perspective is wildly limited. It's a humbling experience that helps you have a better relationship with people you're opposed to, and a better relationship to facts, a better relationship to information, and a better relationship to any controversial issue. In the most viral videos of Mr. Kirk's debate on social media, he looks strikingly composed, armed with enough rhetorical weapons, and poised that he seems to never, quote-unquote, lose. I do like they put that in, the brackets. You could say that it's not a zero-sum game, that at a Charlie Kirk event or a Turning Point event, it's lose-lose. Nobody gets the opportunity to reconfigure their relationship to their position in light of it being examined. Conservatives get better weapons to go out and better tricks to go out and debate against liberals and their family and friends and further this kind of divide that we're all feeling. They get that. Turning Point gets money and good media support. But it could be considered lose-lose. It's not considered win-win, which is the model of debate I'm promoting. It could be win-loss. It could be zero-sum game. I don't know, but let me know what you think in the comments on that. But I think it's a lose-lose kind of model, if it is a debate model, which I think it's better to think of it as like the lose-lose model of a kind of an aggressive, persuasive, rhetorical style that we should dismiss. Even if it works for your side, you wouldn't want that globalized as the way everybody does this. But that seems to be where we're going, right? Towards the end of 2018, a debate with the left-wing pundit Hassan Piker, he jumped to his feet to yell at, is it Sink Uyghur? I don't know how to pronounce that name. Another progressive commentator and Mr. Pikel's uncle. Well, at least his family's there supporting him. That's good. Who appeared to be heckling from the crowd. Come on, like, let's go. He challenged him to a fight. That's kind of sad. Probably pretty like getting mad because someone's heckling you. If somebody's heckling you or disrupting you from the audience, it probably means you're doing all right. They're trying to throw you off because you're doing good. And if your fidelity is not towards being right, but to presenting the best possible debate argument you can, hecklers will never disrupt you. What do I mean by presenting the best debate argument you can? By being, by instead of forwarding your, determine that you're right, you're forwarding disclosure. You're providing a narrative of how you look at the evidence and how you came to it and how you tell your story about after you came to that evidence, how you changed and how you concluded that the motion is a good idea or a bad idea. And you put everything on the table because you are aware that you, like your opponent, is a human being and limited by perception, preconception, and motivated reasoning. Debate is our cure for that. And people think that debate is hostile or horrible or it's two-sidism, and all of these critiques don't understand that it's a bad model of debate. It's globalizing assertive, rhetorical, persuasive argumentation, or rhetorical persuasion, or rhetorical argumentation that's hyper-assertive as what debate should look like is a huge problem. Put that back in its box and allow debate to exist as this separate discourse from all of that. And then the benefits of that will expand, just like the benefits of dialogue and discussion expand into other realms of human discourse. The skill and polish stood out in particular when taking on idealistic undergraduates with little to no debating experience. Like he's taking advantage of the lack of rhetorical education in the country. Why do you like Trump so much? By calmly and methodically overwhelming his opponent. This guy's not an opponent. Maybe he's looking for reasons. I like Trump too. Why do you like Trump so much? Maybe he's looking for reasons for that. A litany of memorized talking points delivered at high speed, a technique that Dr. Voth says tends to be connotative of intelligence to audiences. I agree with Dr. Voth there on the idea that if somebody can rattle off a bunch of facts quickly, it seems like you're smart. But again, that's discourse that is against the model of debate that I am shipping to you. And then Jubilee, they talk about Jubilee, which I think is a huge waste of time. Jubilee is just the difference between boxing and Roman gladiatorial arena. One has kind of a sport and athleticism and respect to it. One is just a horrible, awful way to satisfy bloodlust of a population that's being exploited. That's what Jubilee's doing. They make their money off of exploitation of the desire for blood sport and our desire to really see people hurt that we disagree with and to really see them suffer. Like all the videos of people screaming expletives at the other political side, all this stuff satisfies this kind of bloodlust because we feel like we don't really have that much in our lives going for us other than consumption, but we really do like to hate and to be violent towards the other side and really see them suffer and get punished. And that's what Jubilee makes its money. Jubilee is an awful company, an awful YouTube channel, and I hope they stop doing this, but they probably won't because people love to see people violently owned by the arguments they already agree with. Debate is not that. Debate is not Jubilee. Jubilee is a huge blight on rhetorical education and the rhetorical health of the world. Then they talk about this guy, Hunter Kozak, who was the last person asking Charlie Kirk a question, who has his own kind of YouTube following of this kind of stuff. But I think people go to this because they either hate it and they want to see what stupid arguments someone's making, or they like it and they want to refine their own arguments without reflection by somebody who's much more trained in argumentation than they are. So that's this New York Times article. A lot going on there in that New York Times article. But I think I made it clear what I advocate when I say debate should be a particular kind of discourse that pushes back or hedges in this kind of aggressive, assertive, violent, I hate you, you're an idiot kind of rhetoric that, or kind of argumentation that we get from pretty much everywhere. And Charlie Kirk was a big beneficiary of this kind of rhetoric. But is it a debate? Is he a champion of debate? Absolutely not. Is he a model of maybe how to go out and push a particular politics that you believe in? Yes, a fantastic model. Turning Point is a fantastic model of that, and what he did is a fantastic model, but don't be deceived. He probably worked more hours than you could imagine getting that delivery right, getting the comfort level right for that, and with a staff preparing arguments for him and going through practice, the kind of refinement. That kind of refinement doesn't come from a genetic model of intelligence. It comes from practicing and being familiar with all the different arguments that your opponents can make. Aristotle said rhetoric is the identification of all available means of persuasion in a given instance. I think that's what the Turning Point staff was doing for Charlie Kirk. That's not debating. That's rhetorical argumentation. It's great. It's fun and powerful, and you can become quite good at it. But let's not conflate that with debate, which is something that puts the brakes on that and gives people the kind of practice and inoculation they need to live in a democratic world that values plurality, diversity. I think we all value these things. Maybe we don't. But maybe these are equivocal words. What do we mean by pluralism? What do we mean by diversity? It could be equivocation. But I think everybody values that at some level. And we also value argumentation and free expression. We value these things. Here's what I think. Here's what you should think too. That's the whole point of microblogging platforms, right? A zinger that makes everyone feel like they're stupid if they don't agree with you. But this is one form of discourse, and it has globalized into all forms of argumentative discourse. We need debate to check this back. All right, well, this is video number 2 in the Bad Models of Debate series. I think I might have to take on formal academic debate next. That'll be kind of fun. All right, please drop a comment or send me an email. I'd be happy to talk with you about anything we talk about on this podcast. And if you would like to support the channel, please consider supporting the channel. We have a place where we take all kinds of contributions right here. Thank you very much. See you on the next video. See you.